We're live on YouTube and we're live. Yes, sir. There we go. All right. I want to thank everybody for joining us today on this new edition of both the Black Press Audio Digest, and we're grateful again to have the opportunity to kind of do a follow-up of some major events and activities this week that have been game changers, if you will. And it's a blessing to have a game changer with us. He is a team player and a game changer. That's how I like to refer to him. And I, because of my association with him, I've learned how to do that as well, to be a team player and a game changer. The Reverend Timothy McDonald is the founding pastor of First Iconium Baptist Church in Atlanta, Georgia. He is a graduate of Candler School of Theology. He is a native son of the soil of Georgia, down in Brunswick. Is that right? And in Brunswick, Glenn County.
Maud Arbery.
Yeah, and he's Maud Arbery is his from the same soil from which he hails. One of the prophets of our day, always on the cutting edge. He's the president of the African American Ministers in Action, People for American Way. And my mentor, leader, brother, friend, all of that. And so I'm thankful. My introduction and belonging in his presentation, he got to go. So I'm glad just to have him. And I'm grateful that he just had a moment. I'm excited about this week, and I wanted to make sure that I checked in with you to get your assessment of it. I can't think of anyone else who'd have a sharper, keener sense of what happened and what things need to happen given what happened with 426. And I just wanted to open that opportunity for you, if you don't mind, to just talk to us. Let's have a word of prayer. I always like to begin with prayer, and then we can get right into it if you don't mind, Tim. Dear Lord, we thank you so much for the blessing of being able to agree and to talk with and share vital information in reference to what's going on in the world today. Thank you for this coveted privilege, and thank you for this relationship with you and with Tim and with my brother and with my sisters and brothers and those who are in the struggle for justice. And thank you, Lord, that doing right and fighting for justice is being right with you, being right with our neighbor. Bless this event, this broadcast, the simulcast, we pray in Jesus' name. All right, thank you again, Tim, for your time. And it's good to see Sister Brenda Robinson Williams is just joining us, so I can see comments now. Bless the Lord. So Tim, please, if you don't mind, your impressions, your sense of what happened, how things, whatever you feel led to share with us about this historic, because you've been through some historic moments in your ministry. How would this rank as a historic moment for you?
Well, it is a historical moment. I don't want people to get the impression that this is some overwhelming historical moment. Okay. I first thank Bishop Jackson for his leadership. When he first came to Georgia as Bishop, Reverend Albert E. Love, my dear brother who transitioned just a few months ago, said, we got to go meet the new AME bishop. Because we work ecumenically, right, and pulling in and crossing denominational lines. And so we set up a meeting with Bishop Jackson and introduced ourselves, as involved in the community, clergy involved. And one of the first things that came out of his mouth was, why y'all don't have a hate crime bill? And we explained that we actually did at one time have a hate crimes bill. Senator Vincent Fort actually introduced it, and it passed when we had all three branches of government under quote unquote Democratic leadership. Once leadership shifted to Republicans, leadership, immediately our hate crime bill was repealed. And a decade and a half or so, we have been among 4 states in the whole country that did not have a hate crimes bill. I think that the catalyst for this one passing was indeed Ahmaud Arbery, his tragic murder down in Brunswick, Georgia, where those perpetrating against him actually used the N-word more than once. And national, please hear this, it was national that putting out in the arena that Georgia did not a hate crime bill, that it was only 4 states that did not have. CNN, all the major networks, ABC, yes, it was one of their leading stories that Georgia did not have a hate crimes bill. And what your listeners and observers need to understand, it really then started shifting from Ahmaud Arbery to the potential economic impact it could have on the state of Georgia. Georgia has hailed as the best state in the nation to do business for several years, but having a bad negative image, which is a negative brand, affects conventions. It affects corporations moving into the state. It impacts the bottom line. So when this issue of the hate crime bill was now being perceived as potentially impacting Georgia's economics and Georgia's bottom line, corporations started coming on board, in addition to the faith community being led by Bishop Jackson. And they said, look, we Ahmaud Arbery, we are concerned about all of the categories of fellow citizens who are going to be impacted. But the main reason that we need this hate crime bill, because it's about to impact us economically. And so you saw Delta and many of the other leading corporations coming on board, putting pressure on elected officials, particularly from the governor, Speaker of the House, Senate leaders and all. And this needs to happen for our state. And so they tried to still kill it, you might recall, with the catching the police as a part of the bill, which is never in any of the other 46 hate crimes bills around. Well, there was a profession, a police officer, first, frontline. That's never occurred in any other hate crime bill legislation throughout the country. And it was an attempt to stop it because there are those who still voted for it, who really don't believe in it and don't want it to happen. The final thing that I would say is, let's be careful. I'm glad we have it. I'm glad for the leadership. I'm certainly glad for the faith community, again, led Jackson. But you'll be hard pressed to find a state that has used the hate crime bill of the other 46 states that have it, that benefits an African American. You'll be pressed to find that. In fact, I did a little research. I didn't do a lot. I'm a researcher. I love to research. I haven't found one. So it's good that we have it. Glad we have it. We needed to have it. Now there are 3 states out there, and Georgia is not one of them. That part is good. But I don't want anybody to believe that this is some panacea. That now that we passed the hate crime bill, hoorah, hoorah, hoorah.
Right.
Other pressing issues that certainly addressing. I can't Governor signed it. I hope it's a nice big ceremony. And certainly to Ahmaud Arbery's family, we salute. And in his case, in particular, not only should the federal government hate crime, but the state of Georgia should be looking at his particular case as a hate crime.
Absolutely.
So we'll see where it goes, but I'm happy. I'm celebrating, and I can't thank the faith community enough. We went to that General Assembly over and over and over.
That's right.
Trying to get it for several years. It's just not just happened. It's been several years fighting for this legislation, and it is to be applauded. Those who were involved ought to be lifted up, but don't think it's our panacea. There's much, much more work that we have to do.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for being on the case. And so Bishop Jackson came in 2016, and so that's at least how long it's been for him. But for you, it's before when Senator Vincent Fort was putting it together. I know Dee knows about the background of that as well. I'm grateful to have with us Ms. Dee Hagler, who is one of the one of the House of Representatives assembly persons, and who has been active in the House of Representatives for a million years, just in terms of her activism and capacity in terms of working with elected officials. She's a political science major from South Carolina State University, and she's an AME. And so she definitely has a background in activism and social action and political action, and was working also with Bishop Jackson the entire time. Also grateful to have Reverend James Thomas, who's in Los Angeles, is a part of Clergy for Black Lives Matter. He and I were colleagues and workers together, activists in Los Angeles. He's also a professor, adjunct professor in Cal State LA, and he pastors the congregation. So we're glad to have the both of you on as well. Tim, did you have any other thing you want to say? Okay, so Tim is going to sign off. Thank you for at least that particular part of the analysis. God bless you.
Stay woke.
Stay woke. Stay woke. Amen. Amen. Thank you so much, Tim. God bless you. All right. Good to have you on, Dee. Did you want to kind of chime in your impressions of what happened? I know you were part of really a lot of what happened in terms of the groundswell, and then, but you've seen what you've seen, and what were some of your impressions and your feelings about hate crimes legislation?
Thank you. So I'm just so glad, first of all, that you're having this podcast, and second, that the legislation finally passed. It was not an easy feat, but now that I'm out of the General Assembly, I'm just very proud of all of my former colleagues for passing that bill, because I know a lot of groundswell was done, and I got to give Bishop Jackson credit. He was relentless. Like from day one out the gate, he was like, Dee, why don't y'all have a hate crime here? Because when he came to Georgia, I was actually still in the General Assembly. I was like, Bishop, we have been working on this. And when the Republicans came in control, they just reversed it. They do what they want to do. We see that on the national level even. Yeah. So basically, we had to go back and work to undo the unjust that they had done. And so that took many years. It took almost 15 years to undo what they had undone. So, so here we are now. So I'm really glad about it. But they turned around and pulled trickery on top of the hate crimes bill, and now they have police as a protected entity. We already had it as a protected class in the state of Georgia in the legislation, but now what they've done is basically made it a hate crime in essence to do anything to the police, and has allowed them in HB 838 to now be able to sue citizens, and citizens can't do anything about it. So they really pulled a quick one on the same day that they passed the hate crimes bill, turned around and used it against the very people who needed it the most. So that's what you have in Georgia.
Okay. Unpack that a little bit, because that is trickery and skullduggery. If you can kind of pull that Hebrew and Greek out, Pastor know what I'm talking about. Okay, if you can kind of help us with that.
Now listen, you said, Pastor, know what you're talking about, pull the Hebrew and Greek out. I am an ITC graduate, graduate attorney. So let's okay. All right. So let me unpack it. Let me unpack it for you.
Unpack it, please.
Let me unpack it for you. So basically, in the state of Georgia, first responders are already covered under the Constitution as a protected class. First responders. This is why you already have stuff in place called qualified immunity, where basically if police officers do anything under the law, they can't be held responsible. Or if they're doing something in the line of duty, let me be very clear, they won't be held responsible. In Georgia now, what they have done is they tried to attach that to the hate crime bill. If you realize, at the beginning of the week, we had confusion because they at first, the bill was on pass, went up to the Senate, and they added those attachments to the bill, those addendums to the bill, right? Basically, what they were saying was they were trying to negate the fact of hate crimes altogether and say what's really happening is people are hating law enforcement and first responders. And so, in essence, now what they've done, let's say in a situation like a George Floyd case or in a Rayshard Brooks case, that basically is the people responsible themselves for having hate towards police officers. Let's say if you don't respond when they tell you to, or that you've said an unkind word to them or whatever, and now they're the ones that can actually sue you.
So they
because now they're protected class.
Jesus.
Yeah, see where I'm going with this? And so now the people in the legislature are so upset. Well, excuse me, the Democrats are so upset now that they did this. It went straight down party lines. It was like a 92-78 vote in the House. In the same way in the Senate. I mean, all the way down to the party lines because it was just unbelievable. So they said, we'll give you your hate crimes legislation so we can get y'all out the way. We won't have to talk about it anymore. But we're going to unravel just a little bit of this under another bill. And they slipped it on another bill that had nothing to do, actually, to be honest with you, with hate crimes or with protecting police officers.
That's pretty slick.
Well, I mean, they're playing, chess and we're playing checkers. Yeah. And so we've got to catch up to them. And the biggest way to catch up to them is like my shirt says, we got to vote. See, vote.
Vote.
Okay. So,
that's right. Thank you for having that on today.
We got to vote them out.
What shield is that? What shield is that?
Oh, it's the only shield. It's the most beautiful shield in the world. I mean, really, it is. To Significant Sorority Incorporated.
My wife.
What else is there, right?
My wife would agree with you.
You see, your wife is a lovely, beautiful woman. See, he who findeth a good thing.
You find a delta, find a good thing, and obtain favor from the Lord. Y'all over here redacted. See, you over here messing with scripture now.
I'm just saying. But you know what? Absolutely. When you came back to Georgia, you got right on the ground running with social justice. But actually, before you left Georgia, you were doing a lot of social action. And I see you took it out to California back. So I think it's one of the tenets of the church we have to promote. And I'm glad when Bishop Jackson came to Georgia, he was really adamant about social justice being part of the plan for Georgia, part of the 4 things that the 6th district would push. So we have to continue to do that. And down in the, not just in the Georgia General Assembly, but across the country, we have to have more clergy involved in the political process, period. I mean, period. And so when I was there, be honest with you, I was the first AME preacher, first preacher, period, ordained elder to be elected to the General Assembly since Henry Manil Turner. That's a long period of time.
That is.
That's a long period of time.
1896.
Yes. Now we have other preachers. Preachers now who've come since I was elected. When I was elected in 2008, but when I came on board, I was the first AME preacher ordained that had been there. Actually, even out of the Baptist preachers, because the Baptist preachers came after me too, since Henry Manil Turner.
And you got Warnock, who AME, not Baptist brother, but a Morehouse brother, who's running now. How do you think he'll do? Do you have any idea?
Well, I hope he does well, but we also have to realize, there is 9 Black people running for that seat. So but hopefully, I think he has the right,
got the right agenda and platform.
Yes, the right agenda. Yes. But with 9 Black people running, nine. I don't know if we thought that out properly. That's what happens when we don't strategize, when you split votes. So hopefully that will not be the case.
They'll work together at some point. Let me ask you, and then we'll expand the conversation to the West Coast and with Pastor Thomas. What do you think probably should be among the next? You just said it, vote, I guess. So talk about that, because that was a real debacle a couple of weeks ago.
Are you still talking to me? Okay,
Yeah.
yes. So, in Georgia, one of the why I left the General Assembly is because I ran for Secretary of State. So that in itself, one of the reasons why I left the General Assembly is because I felt like Georgia was the king of voter suppression. And voter suppression didn't start in 2018. Hence the reason I ran for it. It actually started back around 2006. It was very prevalent. That's when they started doing a lot of the trickery as related to closing polls and making all kind of accusations that were incorrect. By the time we got to 2010, 12, 13, 14, they were doing all type of things like voter intimidation, going and knock on people's doors to see if they really live where they say they live. When they started really implementing the absentee ballot process, they were saying that there was voter fraud that we were doing and locking people up in Georgia. I mean, that's why we had equipment 10+2. And so you could just look throughout Georgia history over the last 12 years, and you would see nothing but downright voter suppression. And so hence enter the primary, and what we saw were extended lines. People were standing in line 5, 6, 7+ hours. Some people didn't even get their vote in to about midnight.
That's right.
People didn't know that their polls had been relocated. And we know that COVID-19 was serious, but even with the absentee ballots, people never received them. I mean, that's why a lot of people end up going out to the polls because they didn't get their ballots. And so they didn't want to miss the opportunity to cast their vote, which is to sacred right. Like one of the things that the late Dr. Joseph Lyard would say, it's a sacred right. So, they stood in line. But a lot of people left, people who had to go to work or people who had to, go back home and take care of elderly people. Some people just could not stay in line 8 hours to vote on election day. So now what the legislation they put forth in the last 2 days is that Georgia would no longer be able to send you out an absentee ballot unless you requested yourself. Like you fill out the paperwork, you send it in the past election, they just sent it automatically to everybody. And they said, no. Because Trump already told y'all, Trump done told y'all it's nothing but voter fraud. So now the Speaker of the House and the Lieutenant Governor says it creates a pathway of fraud. So no, you all that work yourself. There you go. So here we go. The struggle is real, y'all. The struggle is real.
It is real. Struggle is real.
Struggle is real. It's real.
Good God. It's always something else.
Always something. That's something else we got to fight for.
Yeah. I remember Bishop Jackson preaching about one of our virtual 6 district Saturday sessions. He talked about how one of the points he made was about how David had 5 stones and only needed 1 to fell Goliath. And, so he posed the question, why did Goliath have 4 more stones? And they pointed out the fact that Goliath had brothers. The giants keep coming. So you got to be ready for, the next few giants that keep coming. And so the giants are all over the place. Reverend Thomas, let me thank you again for being willing to be a part of this podcast and simulcast and presentation. And I'm just honored because the two of you, Dee, and I've known Dee forever, and to have known you as well as a brother in the struggle has been an honor, and particularly given the challenge we've had in terms of the shift of the type of movement we've seen to one that's less church or ecclesial centered and much more community centered. And for us to have made that shift, that paradigm. In fact, when Trayvon Martin was killed, and we were in Leimert Park, that was kind of the birth of the Black Lives Matter LA. Dr. Melina Abdullah out there that evening at the Leimert Park and others, and that was the birth of BLM Los Angeles, out in the street, not in a church home, not in a sanctuary, but right there at Leimert Park and out in the community. And so how has it been for you to kind of step in that gap and continue that sense of vigilance in reference to the clergy working with Black Lives Matter and what you see now?
Yeah, it's really been great from the standpoint of, and this as well as I do, is that this is work that I've been, doing for quite a long time. And I just seem with Black Lives Matter to be less radical, and when prior to, I was easily categorized as the most radical minister in the room. I never agreed with that. I never thought that was true. I just read my Bible and do what it says, and I never could understand why that wasn't true with, some of my colleagues. And I've never been the kind of person to keep that to myself. So I think the thing with Black Lives Matter, and the reason the beauty of it is that, there's a couple of things, and I wear a couple of hats, as you mentioned, I'm a pastor and I also teach at Cal State LA. My background is in public policy. And so I approach this, from a policy standpoint. And so it wasn't just that I liked or the message of Black Lives Matter resonated with me. It's also the fact that the policy proposals that they put forth are sound. And so I'll give you an example in terms of what that means. For example, we are calling for the defunding of the police. We're calling for the abolition of policing as we know it. Now, some people consider that to be radical, but if you live in Los Angeles, there's a different story. I was there in 92. I was there in 92 when we had the Christopher Commission. We got rid of the governor. We got rid of the chief. We hired a Black chief. Then we got enough. Then we fired that Black chief and got another Black chief. And now we have the toughest reforms ever in the history of any city.
Then we were under the consent decree.
Yeah, we had the consent decree. That's what I said. We have the toughest reforms of any place in the country, and now we are number one in police killings. And so reform is not the answer. What we have to do is acknowledge the fact that the whole concept of policing came from slave catching. That's right. And we built upon that foundation. Now we got to dismantle it. We got to tear it down, and we have to build it over again. And the great divide is our Black elected officials.
That's it. That's it.
And I understand it. I get it. I'm not talking about you, sister, because you ain't in there no more.
Unmute yourself, D. We want to hear you too.
I appreciate that. I thank you. Thank you.
But this is something that we have to deal with. And I say this to the church, and because we in this COVID climate, I really don't care who gets mad at me anymore. I'm out here running for my life for real. And so I'm out here in these streets, and at any given moment, I could, contract this illness and take it to my family and all that. So I don't have time to hear none.
Did he free?
So folks getting their feelings hurt and all that is completely fine with me at this point in my life. But I'm saying this to say that, we can't, when you look at the whole concept of reforming police departments, and mind you, I did my first, I organized my first demonstration against the police department back in 1986, Citizens Against Institutional Racism. That was before it was even a thing. And so I've been about this for a long time, and so, but the point is that you can no more reform the police than you could reform slavery. It is impossible. It is impossible. And if God is able, I'm talking about the church. I'm not talking about elected officials. I'm talking about the church. The church, we as the body of Christ, we're supposed to have faith. And faith for things beyond a big house, a nice car, and all those trappings of success, and so I'm choosing to believe God for the ability to abolish policing and to rebuild it and make it public safety, which is what it's supposed to be. I say this all the time. How can somebody with barely a high school education enforce the law? They don't even have the capacity to understand the law oftentimes. But yet they're out here playing judge and jury and executioner in many cases. And executioner in many cases. And so it is not, one would think that this would be a no-brainer for churches. Right. But it really is not a no-brainer for clergy, but it's really not. They act as if they don't quite understand, and I don't understand why they don't understand. So I'm as confused as they are.
I think a lot of it has to do with fear. Go ahead, Reverend. My apologies.
But you know as well as I do, if it's fear, then what are they propagating on their people? Because they real strong in them pulpits. When it comes down to, I mean, can we just be real? Can I just be real, Miss Delta Sigma Theta? When it comes down to you smashing a woman because you smashing a woman and disparaging her because she preached a message better than you. When it comes down to you trying to put your youth pastor in place because he's wanting to do something that the church has never done before. We can be very, very strong in those areas, and the reality is we're very, very strong and we're not fearful at all within those four walls, and so even though they may be afraid, I don't want a scared leader. So my position is if you're scared, then you need to step down. I don't want a scared. We can't afford scared leaders. And quite frankly, I don't think they're scared. I just think they're busy doing what they've always done. And it's worked for them and it's working for them. And unless you bring it to their front doorstep, they're not going to get involved. That's just what I think. I think
let's say get a camera, a Kodak moment. Yeah.
I think some kind of Kodak go to sleep. I think that we think this could never happen to our children. We don't have to worry about it happening to the folks at our church, at our churches. And so I think that has a lot to do with it. This is not my constituency. This is, and I think this is where the problem lies. And I think that the issue becomes when I talk about Black politicians, well, Black politicians know that they are able to do kind of status quo stuff because they'll always have the church who's going to back them. And so rather than politicians talking about abolishing policing or defunding policing, they know that they can always have the mainstream church who will stand up and say proudly, no, we need to reform. No, we need diversity training. No, all of these things that we have done. California has done all of this. Los Angeles has done all of this. And so it just doesn't work. And I'm so glad to be a part of Black Lives Matter because what's most important and that I like most is they're not willing to give us a pass just because we're Black. If we are not doing what is the best interest of the community, they'll call us out just like everybody else. And I love that because we need to be accountable to our folks. And so Clergy for Black Lives, we're dealing with issues and we're pushing forward, an agenda. We unapologetically say, and I had people, say to me, what are you, do you know what Black Lives Matter stands for? And then they want to go into the whole gender thing and sexuality thing. I'm like, well, I don't know anything about that. I'm just out here fighting to help folks keep from killing us. So if that's what you want to talk about, you need to talk about that with somebody else who has time for that. I'm talking about these folks are out here killing us, and I don't understand why you're not out here. And so since you're not out here, you can't protect me and keep us safe. They are, so I'm gonna ride with them. And it's really that simple. These things are distractions. They're just simple distractions. Reasons that we can come up with as to why we don't want to get involved, as to why we don't want to throw our hat in the ring. So that's what's going on out here in Los Angeles. We are demanding the dismantling of the Los Angeles Police Department. If we do this work right the way we have been, we may have some $750 million that goes directly into the Black community. That's what we try to do. That's what we're trying to do. And so
for human services, mental health services, for education, for
whatever everything, whatever our people are doing for entrepreneurialism. You know, we have a list of 55 demands. 75 Black organizations got together and they drew up these demands that initially had to do with COVID, but we got going and we just kept going and going and going, and we got to 55. And so we're pushing forward we're really pushing forward that agenda. And the interesting thing is that when you talk to folks who are status quo oriented, and that's not meant to be anything, a derogatory phrase or anything, but these are just people who are who are actively involved in the political arena or adjacent to it. You know, the first thing that they said is that, well, who are you all to demand anything? And 55 demands, this is the mindset. 55 demands, you know, that's too many. And what are you talking about? And you know, you want to abolish police. Well, who do I call when when I dial?
That's the wrong question. That's the wrong question. Yeah, it's almost like you would want to call them.
I'm like, in our community, when you call 911, who you get now? You ain't get nobody because they ain't coming.
And if they come blazing.
If they come blazing, and they may end up blazing you and not who you call.
That's right. That's right.
You know.
That's it.
So you know, so that's kind of where we are, and you know, that's the work that we're out here trying to do.
I appreciate that, and you know, the dynamic that two of you bring to this conversation is that this cross-referencing of East and West, and having this historic sense of having done certain things, and you've seen what works and what doesn't work, you know, on both ends. And so a conversation like this, I think, is important to enable us to kind of figure out what we don't need to waste our time trying to do, and to give us kind of a more coordinated approach. Of course, each context has a different sort of feel to it, but really you're dealing with the same kinds of practices and the same kinds of results. And therefore, there's a need to, in some way, have this kind of way to cross-reference what we're doing.
And we have.
Dee, what do you think about? Go ahead. Go ahead. I was going. Dee, let me ask you this.
I was just going to add one thing. Let me add one thing about that I didn't mention about the hate crimes. When I heard that Georgia was pushing for hate crimes legislation, something in my stomach just, because what I know is, like, as in California, they use the hate crime legislation against us. If you do something, you know, particularly to a white person, you call them a name. You know, there was an incident. It was called there was a Long Beach 5, I think it was, and it was a trick-or-treating incident with some young kids, and they were in Bixby Knolls, you know, that area, and black kids trick-or-treating in a very exclusive white area. Well, they were called, you know, names, and they got into a fight or whatever. And one of the little 10-year-old girls threw a newspaper and said something about a hunky or something like that. They charged all them kids with a hate crime. That's a 10-year enhancement on top of a felony. You know, so that's why when they were talking about the hate crimes, I'm like, these white folks are going to figure out a way to use this,
flip it
against us. And it sounds like that's exactly what they did, but I just wanted to make sure that I said that before I forgot it.
What do you think about that? Do you think there's a possibility something like that could happen here in Georgia? They could flip the hate crimes bill to actually go against the very community that it was supposedly designed to protect?
I do, and I think it's going to be used for the benefit of police officers. Not to mention, if you heard when the Reverend McDonald was speaking earlier, in doing the research across this country, it's very rare that it has been used to help anybody Black. So I don't, you know, the hate crime legislation we had prior that the Republicans, you know, unfolded, did away with, whatever, it was a little stronger. The teeth were a little bit stronger in protecting classes of African Americans, Hispanic. But now this version basically is probably going to benefit more of the LGBT community and police officers than just African Americans. I mean, we just got to tell the truth about it. I mean, it's going to be there, but it's going to take a lot of work and the will of a good attorneys to try to file cases and then have good good DAs. Good DAs.
We ain't got that out here.
Oh my God. Oh, you ain't never lied.
You don't have any good DAs. You got some good DAs somewhere. Got to be one somewhere.
You know,
sorry,
I was there. I was there, Pastor Logan. I was there at her house, right?
Yeah.
When her
We're talking about Jackie Lacey. Oh, that was you.
Pulled the gun on us.
That was you.
I was there.
We've been trying to get rid of Jackie Lacey for the long. We call her Jackie Lackey because she is the lackey of local law enforcement.
We know how. Oh my God. We know how these DAs. Well, I'm gonna try to find at least one good one, at least two good ones. Because right now we're trying to unseat several of them in Georgia. So, but I'm gonna find some good ones somewhere.
Barn Hill and Jackie Johnson, for instance, who tried to cover up and taint and obstruct the Ahmaud Arbery case, apparently trying to recuse themselves, but then putting some statutory comments along with the recusal to sort of redirect, if you will, the perspective of the recipient DA. And so it was, there was a caravan, in fact, a multi-city caravan last Friday. Reverend Malone was scheduled to come on. He has been in a hospital because it's a HIPAA violation. Let me just say the brother is recovering, as it was a lot that he went through to deal with that. And so there is continued progress in reference to that recall Barn Hill process. And so that is one of the areas of redress that was also exacerbated by the travesty against Ahmaud Arbery. And I think that ultimately it is, awakening, if you will, the African-American electorate to the potential of being able to really hold several law officials accountable and replace them with those who have a different agenda and perspective. And that's certainly where what you're talking about, D, is going to have to come in place, because it's not just enough to take somebody out, but you got to make sure that whoever you replace them with is not going to be a spawn of Satan, so to speak, and because you can go from bad to worse with some of these. So, that's really the challenge here. Let me just ask you going forward, because I know, we're talking about police reform and we're talking about these issues with justice in terms of hate crimes. But do you ever feel like, what do you feel should be or could be next, or should be, I guess, the appropriate approach for more substantive and structural change going forward, if you will?
Okay, so that's going to vary state by state. You have to understand that in Georgia, we still have citizens arrest laws. We still have, stand your ground in place. We still, so Georgia is at a place, it's almost at ground zero, to be honest with you, in order to protect Black folk, people of color. So we have so much that has to be done here, just on the periphery. I mean, I'm serious. I'm trying to think of what could we do collectively across this country. And the only thing I can really think of is, one, we got to vote, get people out of office, get the right ones in office. And to me, this is not even necessarily a old and young divide, because a lot of people are saying we need the young people to lead. No, this is people who have the right consciousness to lead. Because something when the Reverend Thomas was speaking, I started laughing. It's like people could be afraid, but then he went back and said, no, they're not afraid. But one thing we all know is that a scared Negro will get you killed. That we know. We might not we might not know too much more, but we know that much. And so
that's one thing we do know.
We do know that. And so when you try to do justice, to dispense justice, it comes with a cost. And people are really, they either are afraid or they don't have the political will to do better, because it's easier. It really is easier like he said, to go along and get along. I mean, because if you're sitting in an elected position and you want to keep your committees or keep your status in the community or whatever it is that you're doing, you're not going to go against the grain too much. You're just not going to do it unless you're going to be labeled a radical like me. But I'm okay with that. And so what I do know is that clergy have got to start standing up. This is why I love this clergy for Black people. I mean, for Black lives. Why we don't have that in Georgia? Why you don't have that over here? Logan, what's up with that? Because
look, you do now. This is how it started. It started, it started just like, and see, our whole objective. I got tired of people thinking that pastors were not involved with this movement and pastors should not be. I'm very churchy. And so it ain't like, and I don't make any apologies for that, but I know that this work is right. And again, I don't know what Bible these people are reading, but my Bible puts me in this space. You know what I'm saying? And so what we've decided that we would do in terms of coming together is that we would have conversations. We would around what it takes to be in the space, because you got to understand it looks a little different. People may not recognize you as Reverend so-and-so or Pastor so-and-so. I'll tell somebody in a minute when they say Pastor James, I'll say, well, I'm not your pastor, so you don't have to call me that. Now you can, but I'm not your pastor. And so, I had somebody say one time, I said, well, I got to let you know I'm a pastor. It's like, well, I'm not religious. I said, I'm not trying to convert you. So this is a whole different, we're trying to do this work. That's what we're trying to do. We're trying to do this work. And so a lot of times it's difficult for us to get involved. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to show pastors, look, and I've said this and I haven't apologized for it, Pastor Logan, and you know that what I'm saying is true. If church folks treated me like these folks in BLM treat me, I wouldn't have all this gray hair.
Man.
You know what I'm saying? I wouldn't have all this gray hair in my face. And so you can say whatever they want. Them folks is good to me. You know what I mean? And so whatever you think about them, however you feel about them, that's you. And so that's what we're out here doing. And what we know is, we know we can bring the fire if we want to. See, that's the key. We can bring the fire. And that's why we have to be involved. As you are absolutely correct. Now, one of the things that we have in Los Angeles is, you have pastors who are vying for political power. That's not what we're doing. We're not vying to be partners with the mayor. We're not, what we're saying is we're more powerful than the mayor is, because we got the people. We have the people. And
now
so
stop right there for one second, if you don't mind, Pastor, because that's a critical pivot.
That was pretty good.
That's something we talked about before, because I know one thing, and I felt like we do in Los Angeles and in California, is we worship political leadership. We worship politicians and those who are in those elected positions. It just seemed like, man, we got this thing backwards, kind of working for them instead of reminding them that they work for us. And so we were on their agenda instead of them vetting them on the basis and premise of the agenda of the people. And I shared with Pastor Thomas, there was a young boy that had been murdered, Devin Brown, in 2005. I was pastoring Bethel in Los Angeles, 79th and Western, 84th and Western. Devin Brown had been shot 7 times. 13-year-old boy shot through the car window. So, he was out for a joyride. It was stupid, but he didn't deserve to die like that. The community was gathering together at the corner. They wanted to march. They started to march downtown. It was going to be on and cracking. I opened the doors of the church. It was en route, and they marched from the street into the sanctuary, cussing, fussing, mad, saying whatever. But we pulled together a manifesto and an agenda. It was the people's agenda. I'll never forget that one of our Hollywood and famed and still current politicians in DC said, no, I hear what the people are saying. They want to deal with police brutality and black violence, but I just wanted you all to just deal with police brutality. She wanted to, this politician wanted to, just identify and kind of, tell the community what their agenda should be. And the people had spoken clearly, this is what we want to do. And when Minister Tony and I relayed to our beloved elected official that this is what the people wanted, we were going to do what the people wanted, we became an anathema. The movement became an anathema. It was community call to action and accountability. But I've always felt like the agenda should come from the needs of and the spoken aspirations of the people if you're going to have any kind of legitimate movement or action. So what you said is a critical part. And so I'm praying that as you move forward, that is continually the pension. You as Black, and your title is critical. These are pastors for Black Lives Matter. And we say we are unapologetically support Black Lives Matter. Unapologetically. And what that means is, and I've said this before, there will not be a co-opting of this movement by pastors, Black clergy and pastors. Again, we've seen that movie. We can't let that happen. You know what I'm saying? We can't. I mean, people don't like when I say that, but that's a historical narrative.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Elected
officials will use Black pastors and clergy.
That's what they do every single time.
That's what they do. And the thing is that, and what the clergy don't realize is you could get so much more. Mm-hmm. They're giving you kibbles and bits. So whatever you think that you're going to benefit from, you could get so much more. You could get so much more. And you don't understand that you have the power, you have the capacity. You don't need a politician. You got something that the politician doesn't have, and yet is people. This is what they don't get. This is what they don't get. And so the bottom line in Los Angeles, with about 10,000 votes, you could probably be city council anywhere in any district in Los Angeles with 10,000 votes.
10,000 votes.
A city this large. And so Brother Logan, he don't call the names. I don't mind calling the names. I watch Love and Hip Hop.
Just trying to be respectful. Just trying to be respectful.
Hip Hop. So they call names of Love and Hip Hop, right? So.
Do you like you having a faith in action moment? What are you feeling?
But at some
it's
point,
hilarious.
This is the thing. If you're not going to, and one of the reasons that I love Black Lives Matter is, as I said before, if I'm not representing the people, they have a responsibility and an obligation to call me out. Now I can choose to do whatever I want to do, but at least I won't ever be able to say that I didn't know what I was doing. And that's really what the point is. No one can make anybody do anything. But I think there's a responsibility and obligation to say, brother, sister, that ain't right what you're doing. This is the impact of what you're doing.
Right.
I've said to my own members, I've said, you don't like Black Lives Matter, and that's fine. I've never asked you to come out with me to a Black Lives Matter rally, or anything like that. You don't have to like Black Lives Matter. I said, but what you have to understand is when you tear down Black Lives Matter, first of all, you don't know what it's about anyway. I don't know why you're trying to speak negatively of it, but when you do that, there are people, there are forces that's all they're waiting on so that they can pounce on me. And so when you don't understand that while you're tearing down Black Lives Matter, you're giving justification for somebody to attack me. And that's fine, because I'm not concerned about that, because ultimately God is my shield. But I need you to know that you're joining forces
You're being
with those very people against me. And so that's just what it comes down to. And if you don't like what I'm saying, I'm sorry. I don't know what to tell you. Maybe you could find a pastor who will say what you want them to say, but I'm not the one. I have to say what I believe God has placed upon my heart to say, and it's not just informed with my theology, but it's also informed with, what I understand about public policy and how community works and how urban communities work. And so, and I want to say also, while you say that Atlanta and Georgia is ground zero, I just got to tell you, we got, everybody that's talking diversity and equality ain't about it. And so last time I checked, it's a whole lot of Black folks in Georgia with their own homes that they own. You hear what I'm saying?
That's right. That's right.
So we know the American dream includes home ownership. So I don't care what title you have. I don't care what rooms they let you in, what seat they give you at the table. It's about ownership. And so, so in that sense, Georgia has outpaced California. You see what I'm saying? In that sense. And so that's something that we can learn from Georgia. So I don't see at all, what it just seems like to me is that there needs to be space made, space provided for Black pastors to come together. I'm sure there are Black pastors who are looking for a platform or looking for a group to become a part of, that they can speak this way, that just maybe hasn't materialized yet. And so, Pastor Logan, we're gonna lay that on you. For you to help get that organized. We'll help you however we can. And sister, you mentioned that you ITC, and let me just tell you another piece of this. And this is the biggest reason that I think pastors have had some resistance is because Black Lives Matter is female led. And I know the pastors that I have had some friction with. It is because I said this, and I firmly believe this. I said, I believe that, that God is ushering in new leadership and it's female, because we ain't done as men what we should have done. Now, that's what I said. We're busy, pardon my French, having pissing matches while our children are being shot down in the street. We're talking about, who's going to be in charge, who's going to lead the march, who has the voice of the community. That's not important. And while these women are being strategic, uncompromising, marching us forward, that's what's happening. And I think that us male clergy, we feel in some kind of way about it. We don't want to articulate it, but we don't know what to do with this kind of leadership, because this leadership is not compromising. Pastor Logan knows. Dr. Melina Abdullah does not compromise.
No joke.
She is for Black people, period.
Absolutely.
She just announced that at our big rally, huge rally, all kind of white folks. There are more white folks there than us. She said, look, we having Juneteenth rally, celebration down at the Merck Park. Y'all can't come. Find someplace else to go that day, because Juneteenth is for us. That's the kind of leadership that we provide. She's centering us, and we don't feel comfortable about it. It's all about Black folks.
Here in Georgia, organizations like the Concerned Black Clergy, People for an American Way, have the African American Interdenominational Ministerial Alliance. Pastor Tim McDonald was a part of that and was the previous president for Concerned Black Clergy. And so there are pockets of that, but the connection and stitching between interwoven relationships with Black Lives Matter, to my understanding at this point, in the way I know we were connected and a part of the groundswell in Los Angeles, hasn't happened here. I think part of that also has been the shift in the public opinion related to Black Lives Matter.
Oh, absolutely.
That was sort of an anathema.
I was a terrorist. 3 months ago, I was a terrorist.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Well, here in Georgia, to have part of the corpus of Black Lives Matter being, those who are different gender expressions and different gender relationships, that became an issue for a lot of folks to kind of jump into kind of a connection with Black Lives Matter. So those are some of the things in the Bible Belt that need to be fleshed out.
Let me tell you something else in
like
the
Malcolm
Bible.
said, when they try to kill you, they don't kill.
That's you are absolutely right. And that's the main issue. But it's a false narrative and it's a distraction. Because again, I need you all to help me understand. If all of our gospel music, if there was not one person
don't even finish it.
Of that music,
don't finish it.
If there was no LGBT person involved in any of the production of the music that we sing that causes tears to fall, that causes our spirits to be quickened, will we have any music?
That's a tough one right there. Let me ask you, Rev D. What do you think about Georgia and Black Lives Matter in terms of that tension? Well, we're about to close in about 5 minutes.
And what the church needs to do is just say this: it ain't the best policy, but it is the truth. It's the truth in turn. Just don't ask and don't tell. We're not gonna ask if you don't tell us, and just keep it moving. You see what I'm saying? Because that's what the policy is. That's what the policy is. That's what it is. And so
it has already been.
Just be honest about it. But I put it like this. If somebody who is LGBT is ready to take a bullet from me, guess what? We can talk theology tomorrow. Because this has nothing to do with theology per se. This has nothing to do with redemption, because people have to choose Christ. People have to choose Christ. And whatever the doctrine is, they got to choose your denomination. They got to choose your doctrine. So there's a lot of decisions that have to be made that you can't force on anybody. And at the end of the day, it's about humanity. Folks are human. Folks are human. And if we can't, people have, and that's the biggest thing. That is the absolute biggest complaint that you hear from the church. I can't, and it's really laughable. I mean, in a lot, and I know that, and I know what I'm saying is that maybe as it relates to individual members, but when it comes to pastors, we know the deal. We know.
And people know, and families know, and everybody knows. So let me ask Reverend D real quick in terms of Black Lives Matter and that whole component in the South, if you will, in Atlanta, which is a bastion or a community that has a lot of our sisters and brothers who represent different gender expressions.
You mean the Black San Francisco?
It is what it is. It is what it is.
You understand what I'm saying?
Do you think?
What I'm saying is that we have to be real about this. We have to be real about this. We have to.
So, what do you think is the real deal?
The reality is that did nobody make nobody move to the Black San Francisco?
This is so funny. So first of all, we have 2 Georgias. Well, actually, we have 3. So first of all, let me answer your first question about Black Lives Matter. In Atlanta, we're okay with Black Lives Matter, except we have 2 groups of Black Lives Matter. We have 2 groups that they fight for attention. So people just decide on which group they're going to be with. That's just Atlanta, because you have a lot of Black people in Atlanta. That's just a given.
Right.
But you also have well-to-do Black people. You have impoverished Black people. And so you can't forget that that's 2 different competing things going against each other instead of working together, because those who have affluence should be lifting the tide, and instead they stay on their side of the tracks, and the other people, they just say, well, God bless you, go on. Now, Georgia, we have 10% of the 30% of the population in Georgia is African American. 30%. We have $64 billion worth of buying power, yet unlike California, even though you say this is Black San Francisco, we get less than 5% of any federal, state contracts in Georgia. I'm talking about Black folk. So when Black folk do excel, it's only because, remember, the cost of living in Georgia is much less expensive than it is on the West Coast now. It's a lot of dynamics at play. And so when you have people who cannot even compete the way they need to compete because of public policy, all this comes back to public policy. It doesn't matter whether it's redlining, it doesn't matter if it's gentrification, it all comes back to public policy. And this is why clergy have to be involved in Black Lives Matter organizations. Now in Georgia, because it is the Black Mecca, we have a ton of Black organizations that do things, but we don't, and of course we do have concerned Black clergy, but there is a disconnect. When I do go to the meetings, which is rare, even though this is the first time we had a Black female president, you can count on your hand 5 people that might be under 50. I'm not even talking about under 40. Wow. I'm not talking about under 30. I'm talking about under 50. Maybe 5. And so obviously there is a disconnect, and something is not happening. I mean, because it's not. They try, but something has happened that they can't get their message to the masses.
Well, see, this is the thing. You know, those people. This is what the young folks did. Now we know Trump's rally was a complete and utter embarrassment, right? In terms of who he thought was coming. The reason that he thought that 1.1 million people were trying to reserve seats was that there's this Asian band who tweeted, everybody go out and reserve tickets to the Trump rally. They went out and reserved tickets. He thought 900,000 people was gonna be at his rally. Them young folks bought them tickets. They bought all of them except 6,500. And that's why all of those seats were vacant. My point is that these young people have different strategies that employ technology in ways that we don't even understand. We don't even understand it. And so they know how to employ technology. And also too, they have a level of knowledge that, you know, they have the internet, they've grown up with it. They can pretty much hear any scholar, any person, just by clicking on the internet, you know, and so.
And they will fact check in a minute.
You know, I remember when I went back to graduate school, they said, where are you going? I'm going to the library. The students were like, well, for what? What are you going to the library for? It's all online. It's all online, you know. And so this
must be going for a quiet time.
You know, they think that young people today just have a lot of energy and no knowledge, but that's not true. See, I may have had a lot of energy and no knowledge, you know, but the young people today, that's just not true. You know, they have the internet and they can research any topic imaginable, you know, and so a lot of times they'll have more information than we do. When we're talking to them, and I've seen young people do this, when we're talking to them, they Googling what we're saying to see if it's true.
That's right.
So before they leave our presence, they have challenged us about something, a statement that we made, that they found something online that contradicted that. And so that's not something that we're accustomed to. They always want to know why. We grew up with your elder or your authority figure said, okay, go do that. You just went and did it. They say, well, why? And we think, don't be disrespectful. No, it's not that. It's that they just want to understand why they're doing it. After you explain to them why, they're like, oh, okay, I'll do that. But
they can see the plausibility
of disrespect.
Right. This is different in our upbringing. As we get ready to close, Rem, we'll let you again sort of talk about what you see in terms of the future of over the next few months, next year, with the efforts of the pastors with BLM and what you see happening with the dismantling of the police. And then, Dee, I want to close with you in terms of where you see things going next and in terms of the struggle for voting and all of that, and what other things you see in terms of your own vision of what, since you've been in Georgia and you know Georgia and you see where we need to go? And what would you say that pastors need to be about? So Reverend Thomas, and then D, if you would close us in prayer as well, please.
Well, I see that this is an opportunity to really expand and grow and stretch the church, both from a theological standpoint and a social justice standpoint. I see this bringing us back into the era of all of those folks who have gone before us, like Richard Allen. He founded the AME Church in opposition to white supremacy. That's why we have a Black church tradition, because of the work that he did. And so, so I just think that it's very, very hopeful right now. I think that we have to remember, one of the challenges that we have in terms of Black Lives Matter is it's centered in Black people. You got to be Black to be a part of Black Lives Matter. Now you can be an ally, but it's about us. And I think we have a very difficult time centering us. This is about Black folks. And I tell folks, this is about us. This ain't about you. This ain't about diversity, none of that stuff. This is about Black folks, and so this is the first time that we've been able to do that unapologetically. And I think that the ways in which we've done it in the past, have to change, because we have to work to dismantle these systems that have been oppressing us. And the only way that we can do that is we have to call it for what it is. We got to stop dressing it up. We have to pay no attention to white fragility, and stop trying to accommodate folks in order
make them feel
to be promoted. And so I would just say, my last point is, I'm glad, I love Georgia. I love Atlanta. I've always said, that's one of the places that, that I wouldn't mind living. I couldn't make the right money there though. but I think that this is a start. This is the beginning. I think we can learn from each other. And so, Pastor Logan, we got you out here on the West Coast, whatever we got to do, only a plane ride away. If you got, if we got to fly a plane up in there and shake things up, we willing to do it. They ain't
shake
gonna
it
know
up, shake it up.
They ain't gonna know we ain't from Atlanta. We just Black. So,
that's right.
God bless both of you all. I really appreciate this time.
Thank you. Likewise. And I'm really proud of the work you're doing, Pastor. I appreciate it. And it was a pleasure to work with you there. And it's a blessing to be able to continue to cross-reference here. Rev D.
Well, I think he said everything as far as coming together. But I do want you to know that Black people actually do work together across all the states. And so even when I was in the legislature, even now I still work with policymakers to make sure that we have some type of central message that we are sending out to people so that they'll know how to be on one accord. And I know that even though you should not ever have to feel like you should be indigent, what's the word I'm looking for? That you have to listen to elected officials or that you have to appease them. The only people that can change public policy are elected officials. So you got to find a way to work with them, not for them, but with them, because actually elected officials work for you. And that's part of the problem. A lot of times people have not realized their role. And so what I've also learned is we just got to keep pressing forward. We can't get caught up in titles and argue with people about whether you should be with Black Lives Matter, whether you should defund the police. And this is one thing I always say. I've been preaching this particular sermon for about 8 years. I always talk about Harriet Tubman, one of my favorite people. And I started just interjecting her in all of my conversations. But I always tell people I will never argue with people that Harriet Tubman would have shot. Now, I ain't gonna do that. So I just want y'all to remember that.
I love it.
I'm gonna do that. You got it. Don't do that. Don't argue with people that Harriet Tubman with a shot, because you're wasting your time. You could have got a lot more done in the process. So that being said, we just got to keep pressing on and work together. That's all I got for you.
Absolutely. Come on to close out in prayer, especially pray as Harriet Tubman would have prayed, perhaps.
Well, I don't know if you're going to get a Harriet Tubman prayer right this second, because we're going to call on the spirit of our ancestors, because that's what we need right now. That's our prayer right now. Spirit of the ancestors, come cover us Keep us strong. Give us the strength and tenacity that you all had so that we can continue this journey. We know it's not a sprint, but a marathon. And the race is not given to the swift nor to the strong, but the one that endured to the end. Amen.
Amen. You know, I'm repping this sister right here.
Yeah, oh, she's the real deal. She's the real deal. Always has been.
I told you a man that finds a Delta as a wife find a good thing. Didn't I tell you that?
Thank you so much, D. God bless you.
All right, y'all take care.
Thank you, Reverend Thomas. All right.
Bye-bye.
God bless you.
God bless
All
you.
right. All right.
Take care of y'all. I want to thank our panelists, if you will, my guests, those who are with us, Pastor James Thomas and Reverend D. Hagler, who are with us. I want to thank all of you who streamed live with us on the Black Press Audio Digest this evening. If you have any other comments, please inbox me. But for God's sake, get involved, be connected, and think for yourself. And remember to know your own history, to know your own sense of who you are, and don't let anybody tell you what that should be, and be unapologetically yourself. Part of the platform of Black Press Audio Digest is to be a part of clearinghouse, if you will, for the issues that are relevant to our community. And we call ourselves who we are because we know that we have to have our own conversation as we also conversate with others in other communities. You can't be a committed, connected other until you work with others, until you know who you are. And so that's part of this process, and that's where we are at this moment in history. So I want to thank again Reverend D. Hagler, and also Reverend James Thomas, Reverend Timothy McDonald, Bishop Jackson was going to be on the line this evening to talk about the victory for HB 426, but he had a conference. He's preparing for Georgia annual conferences. He has annual conference in Savannah tomorrow, in fact. So this afternoon, with the Board of Examiners and all of those he's meeting with. And then also Dr. Melina Abdullah will be on with us at a different time. But we were extremely grateful then to have Reverend James Thomas. Reverend Malone is kind of convalescing, if you will. He's been working hard. And with the recall that's so far successful, it's underway. We have 45 days to get the necessary signatures we need to recall DA Barnhill and Jackie Johnson. And so the ball is in our court. The power is in our hands. We have to make it happen. And let's do it for Ahmaud Arbery. Let's do it for those who are nameless, whose cases and whose conditions and whose circumstances have probably been swept under the rug in the past. And Ahmaud Arbery was simply the pen that burst the bubble, that burst the balloon, and that brought this to fruition. So thank God for these empowered sisters and brothers who have seen fit to ensure that we stand up for ourselves and that we create a platform by which we can be self-sustaining, self-respectful, self-determining, and that we can move forward in a way that doesn't encroach on others in terms of their rights and their desires for justice, but enables us to be at the table of justice as equal co-constituents in this country, in this state, and in our various municipalities. Long gone are the days that we're going to simply suffer silently. But we're not going anywhere. We've been here. We were brought here. We were here before we were brought here. And we're here now, and we're going to continue to be here, and we're going to be everywhere we need to be, but we are going to be respected, and we are going to respect others. We're going to protect ourselves, and we're going to also achieve what we need to achieve, and so that we can continue the legacy that has been bequeathed to us in terms of survival, thriving, resilience, empowerment, and continued development. So with that, I want to thank you for watching this edition of Black Press Audio Digest, and I pray that you'll share it and that this will continue to grow in terms of a process of conversation and movement. I'll continue to learn and develop and continue to build on these conversations. Next month, my hope is to have conversations with some of our other African-American periodicals. It would be the Christian Recorder, which is a periodical that comes out of the AME Church. The CME Church has one as well, the Zion Church. And so we want to have a forum through which we have conversations with authors and pastors and thinkers who are looking at various aspects of church life and who want to expound on those principled articles that they've written and things that they're thinking about. So I want to thank you again for being with me today. This is Dr. Lewis Logan, part of the DiasporAudio Enterprises, and this particular presentation and production of the Black Press Audio Digest. Thank you so much, and I pray God continues to keep you and give you strength as you continue to move forward in your life. Again, any comments, please make sure that you let me know. Give me, some feedback if you don't mind. Help me continue to go forward and do what I do. God bless. Take care. We're going to end right now this live video, and we'll see you, Lord willing, on next Thursday.